What's up? It's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today we talk about the US U20 team's draw for the Under 20 World Cup. And it was a draw that I think was pretty good for us. It could have been a lot worse. We have Ecuador, Fiji, and Slovakia. I think that this is a very winnable group for us, and I'll go over all the teams that we'll be facing, or as much information as I have. And with a lot of the youth teams, it's not going to be that much. And then I'll go over the team that I'd bring to the U20 World Cup in ideal circumstances. Our biggest opposition in the group stage is going to be Ecuador, and they are a team whose senior squad is on the rise, and that's in part due to the youth movement that's going on. Their young players helped them qualify to the World Cup, and their team is strong this year. Last time at the U20 World Cup in 2019, remember we missed one, and they finished third, and they have a strong team again. It's hard to gauge the domestic talents of the Ecuador team because I just am unfamiliar with the Ecuadorian league. But Oscar Zambrano seems to be a talented midfielder that we'll have to look out for. And then the rest of their team is pretty strong. We have a lot of younger players who have been called to their senior team previously, including their goalkeeper, Napa, who I think is somebody who would be good at keeping the ball out of the net for them. Then they have some other players. Patrickson Delgado is at Jong Ajax. So good player there at Ajax. There's another Valencia, Anthony Valencia, who's a winger who's playing in Belgium at the moment. Then there is, going to make sure I get it right, Joel Ordunez, who's at Club Bruges, who is a part of their World Cup squad, who's a center back. So that's a pretty dangerous Ecuador team, and they're going to be a tough out for us, I believe. And I think that there's a good chance that game ends up being a draw. Maybe we get a win there. It's hard to gauge the talent of these teams, but I think it's going to be a tough match for us. They qualified out of a very tough region in the South American qualifying, where Argentina actually failed to get out. But since they're hosting the tournament now, they're back into the tournament. But at the moment, I think Ecuador is our biggest opposition. And in order to get ahead of them, if we do draw a game, we might have to beat up on some other teams. But thankfully, that's going to be easy with the next squad. Fiji is another team in our group, and yeah, that's going to be an easy win. I have no idea how they were in pot three for this tournament, but yeah, hopefully that could be a game where we get some good goal difference. I was looking at that Fiji squad, and there's one player in Peter Revai. I'm not sure if I said that name right. He is on the books at Maidstone United, who are a fifth tier team in England, about to be sixth tier because they're getting relegated, and he's not made his debut yet for them. So yeah, I think that game's going to be an easy win to say the least, and that's a game where we're hopefully going to put at least seven past them. Maybe we'll have somebody who has their like Erling Haaland moment. If you've never seen that one screenshot of Haaland having like what was it like seven goals against I think it was a team from CONCACAF at a previous youth tournament. I think we'd have somebody get a performance like that. So yeah, Fiji's going to be an easy win for us. Lastly, there's Slovakia, and if you're worried, oh, this is a team that qualified in Europe, so even though they don't have a great team recently, they could easily be a squad on the rise. I'm not saying they're going to be an easy team to beat, but I'd put those worries away. They were actually hosting the UEFA qualification tournament, so they didn't have to go through the intense qualifiers that a lot of other teams have to go through. And because of that, they were able to get in and just all they had to do was win one game in their group stage. They were able to top Romania, and that helped them qualify. So there really aren't too many talents to keep a lookout for Slovakia either. There is, going to get these names right again, Adam Greiger, who's made his Serie A debut. He's not a particularly like great talent, but a player who's made a Serie A debut, and a couple other guys who have trained with the Slovakia first team. But I don't think there's anybody to really be afraid of. I mean, they've got a couple of defenders who have made their debuts, a striker in Timotej Jambor, who scored a good amount of senior goals in Slovakia, Dominik Kali and Artur Gajos, who are midfielders. Like, there are some good players, I guess, but I don't think there's anything to be worried about. Like, obviously, it's a tournament game. Any team is beatable in this, but I think we should be able to qualify out of our group pretty easily. And that game against Ecuador is going to be the main one, and it might come down to us beating up on these teams, getting a couple of goals to go ahead. And hey, CONCACAF has prepared us well for that at least. So I feel pretty good about this group. And I don't want to go too deep into overall tournament predictions, but in terms of our first round matchup, Argentina is the only team that I'd be remotely afraid of in Group A at this World Cup. We are Group B. So Argentina, they're the hosts, and they didn't even manage to qualify for the tournament outright. So even if we face them, that's not the end of the world. There's also Uzbekistan, who they're a team that I think have a couple of good youth players. I saw they had a very good game against Japan while I was scouting Zion Suzuki and Chase a while ago. So like they're not like don't take them lightly, but I'm not terrified of them. And then there's New Zealand, who they could be a problem, but not scared of them, and Guatemala, who we've already taken care of. So I'm not particularly afraid of that. And I think this was a very good draw for us. That Ecuador game is going to be tough. It's probably good competition for us. I'm excited to see that game though. And that's it for the draw. But now I'm going to talk about the team that I'd bring to this tournament because I don't think I've ever really talked about the squad that I'd bring and what I'd do with this team. The squad for this tournament is a 21-man limit, including three goalkeepers. And the three goalkeepers that I'd bring, and this is going to be in ideal circumstances, a good amount of these players won't be able to get called in. I might talk about some alternates for a few of those guys. But in an ideal circumstances, we've got Gabriel Slonina, Chris Brady, and probably Antonio Carrera as our third choice goalkeeper. Slonina and Brady have been just two amazing goalkeepers. Like for youth players, they've been coming through at like just an extraordinary rate both at Chicago, and it's really good that Slonina moved abroad. And Slonina getting starts at such a young age, he looks like a really promising player. Already made his senior debut, moved on to Chelsea now. I'd go with him in goal, but I'd be fine if Chris Brady ended up starting. He's a lot more of a Matt Turner-like goalkeeper, really good shot stopper, not as good with the ball at his feet. And while I do think Slonina does need to get better in that department, he is more well-rounded. So I would be going with Slonina in this circumstance, but I'd be fine with Chris Brady getting in. And Antonio Carrera I'm just going with because I think he's been the backup a good amount. He's been pretty impressive. And he's pretty close to making his Dallas debut. He's probably their backup at the moment. I definitely expect to see him play in the U.S. Open Cup. And if Chris Brady's probably not going to be here, thankfully him and Slonina have been on this like Slonina can get called in because he's with Chelsea and they don't want him. Then Brady's with Chicago, so they don't call him in at all. But before that, Slonina was with Chicago and Brady was the backup. So they've had this like really good pendulum that's allowed both of them to play. I think that's going to continue, and Brady will be with Chicago, and Slonina will get called into this tournament. But since one of them are unavailable, I guess I'd probably call in like Alex Porto, maybe from Fulham. I like him as a keeper. Maybe we want to give Emi Ochoa a call up because I think he's a pretty big dual national battle, and he's probably our best goalkeeper, or at least in the 2005 group for the next cycle. Maybe Diego Colchen has passed him, though he's a 2006 player. At center back, we're with Jalen Neal, Brandon Craig, and Josh Winder. And that is only three center backs, but we'll have somebody else to cover for that. I'll go over that in a bit. You probably know who I'm talking about. But I think all three of them, very good players. Jalen Neal has started to impress with LA Galaxy. He's been doing very well for them. He's good at playing the ball with it out of the back, and I think that he could be one of the next guys to really break through into the senior team. He already made his debut, and well, the second half on that game was pretty poor. He had a very good first half showing, and I think that there's a ton of potential there. And as he gets more experience with the squad, he's going to keep getting better. And I think he might be on track to get called up for the Gold Cup. He's been really promising this year. Jalen Neal's definitely somebody to look out for. Then Brandon Craig hasn't played much at all with the first team, but has impressed a ton with this U20 squad. And I want to keep him in this team because of that. He can also fill in at defensive midfield if we need that, which we might. But really good at playing the ball at the back. He's a beast on set pieces. When you have somebody as big as him taking corners, like that just shows the confidence you have in him. And I'd like to see him make his first team debut with the Philadelphia Union soon. Unfortunately, he's behind Elliott, Glesnes, and Lowe. But again, the U.S. Open Cup is coming up. He should be able to get some playing time. And honestly, he's on a pretty good pace. He's a 2004 player. Young center backs, like it's tough to break into the first team. Neal made his U.S. debut before he made his MLS debut. So I'm not too concerned about Craig at the moment, but I would like to see him get more playing time. And then Josh Winder, who hasn't featured with his U20 team much, but was recently called into the full U.S. squad. So I think we are confident in him. He's the next great talent to come out of the USL. Just he's a 2005 player, so he's eligible for the next U20 team as well, though I'm not sure if he'll even be able to play in that. Hopefully he will, though, because we'll see how good the center backs end up being in that group. But just really solid, consistent player for Louisville. And the main thing is just how solid he's been, how consistent he's been as a player. Like we saw Jalen Neal, he can have a lot of inconsistent moments, and that's completely normal. Like you expect center backs to, have a couple of mistakes every now and then as young players. But Winder, just consistent presence, and that's something that I think could be huge for us. He's got first team experience, and I think those are center backs I feel very comfortable with. At fullback, I have Caleb Wiley, Jonathan Gomez, Justin Shea, and Michael Holiday. And this was one of the tougher ones to pick. Left back was easy, though. Caleb Wiley's been on fire for Atlanta. The only question with him is if you want to play him further forward or not. I'm keeping him at left back for this tournament because I feel pretty comfortable with our wingers, even our left-footed wingers or winger. But, well, maybe that won't be the case for the actual tournament, but I'm not even sure if Wiley will be able to get called in for this tournament, so who knows. But, Wiley looks like an extremely promising player. He made his U.S. debut recently, and I think he's on an amazing track. And I think that, Atlanta, they've got a really good player there. And I'm really excited about Caleb Wiley's future. Then Jonathan Gomez is another very exciting player who's been in a big dual national battle with us in Mexico. I'm like a bit less high on him now that Caleb Wiley's emerged, but still solid defender. Doesn't really have the physical presence that Wiley has, but he's made a move to Real Sociedad. He's getting somewhat decent experience there, and I think that he's a talented player to keep an eye on because he's a huge prospect for us. Was at Louisville before Winder really broke through, and he was excelling a ton. And I think Jonathan Gomez is another really good talent. Then we have Justin Shea, who I'm putting him at fullback. He's the guy who I mentioned at a center back who could fill in there easily. I really like him as a center back, but it doesn't look like that's going to be his position in the long term. He's been playing a lot of fullback, even a bit further forward. I don't know what his position will end up being. His dribbling has actually been pretty good, so that might end up making him a winger. I'm hoping he stays somewhat like as a defensive player because I like his passing out of the back. I think that's very good. He's been solid defensively before as well, so I'm not sure about his position, but for this, I'd like him at right back. I think that's a position that isn't as strong as it could be for us, so I'd stick Justin Shea there because I think he'd work out there. And then I have Michael Holiday, who this was one of the tougher positions to pick for this team because Mauricio Cuevas has captained the side before. And if he's like a big leader on this team, then I'd feel comfortable with bringing a Cuevas into this. So I wouldn't be mad if Cuevas is on the team, but I don't have that information, so I can't say. But Holiday, I think, has passed him because he's getting actual playing time in MLS, and he hasn't gotten too much recently. But I think he's shown that he can be a good player at a professional level. And despite not really excelling in the youth appearances before, I think that I trust him more as a backup to come in and do a good job ahead of Cuevas, who's really kind of stalled out his career in Belgium. He's another guy who's a victim to LA. I think it's LA Galaxy not really trusting their youth players, so he decided to leave and well, he was kind of had his path blocked by Araujo, so can't fault him too much or fault LA Galaxy too much. But I think that he's not in the best position right now, and I'd leave him off the squad because of that, which is something we'll get into later with a former LA Galaxy player. But I'm okay with him being on the team if he's there. But right now, I'd go with Michael Holiday. And as I mentioned before, in all likelihood, there's going to be a lot of these players who are unavailable. So at center back, if LA Galaxy don't release Jalen Neal, you can call in Marcus Furcranis and not miss a beat. And maybe Philadelphia Union, if they advance to the CONCACAF Champions League finals, they might keep Brandon Craig there, in which case Thomas Williams has been filling in a bit, so I could call him in. And I feel pretty comfortable with those guys. At fullback, I could see Caleb Wiley not being released. Jacob Green has been playing pretty well for DC United, so you could bring him in. And there are a lot of decent options for this team. Next, we're going to the defensive midfield position where I'm going with Daniel Edelman and Rokas Puskas. And I'm going to start with Daniel Edelman, who he's been maybe the most improved player this entire cycle. At the beginning, he was kind of filling in at the defensive midfield position, and I wasn't really sure if he was our best player there. But I think he's improved immensely, especially since breaking through at the New York Red Bull first team. I think he's proven he can be an MLS starter, and I honestly wouldn't be opposed if he got called into the Gold Cup because I really haven't been impressed with Kelvin Acosta and Aiden Morris with the senior team. Maybe you could play him alongside James Sands. His technical ability has really improved. I feel comfortable with him making the combination play needed to be playing at the highest level, and his defensive ability has always really been there. And he's probably not the flashiest player on this team. I don't think he has the most potential, but I feel very good about him being a starter. And then we have Rokas Puskas, who I'm putting him at the defensive midfield spot, but when he's playing with in Croatia, he's a lot more comfortable further forward. That is his position. He's more of an 8, maybe even a 10. And, it's kind of a testament to his versatility that he is playing the 6th position for us. And again, long term, he isn't going to be there, and he does make a couple of mistakes with the U20 team specifically because we are playing him out of position. But I think he's one of our top midfield prospects. He's got a ton of energy. He's a real box to box presence that we don't really have in this team. I would feel very comfortable having him as a starter, actually, in a further forward position. But I think for this, I'm having him as a six. And I think he's a really talented prospect. He's really been breaking through in Croatia. And while it's not the highest level, we know a ton of good midfielders come out of Croatia. So I'm really comfortable with Puskas being in this team. The problem is that he's doing a little bit too well in Croatia. He helped them reach the Croatian Cup final, so there's a decent chance he's not released for this tournament. And in that case, I would probably bring in Obed Vargas. He's playing with Seattle, another 2005 player who broke through really early. And I think I'd feel good about him coming in being a backup defensive midfielder behind Edelman. So, yeah, that's my positions for the defensive midfield. Going a bit further forward into the more attacking minded midfielders, the eights, and I should say there's going to be overlap with wingers here. So some wingers could be playing midfield, some of these midfielders could be playing out wide. One will be playing up top for us probably. But we've got Paxton Aronson, Jack McGlynn, Owen Wolf, and Noel Buck. And four very good players. Paxton Aronson broke through at the Philadelphia Union, made his move abroad to Frankfurt. He's been playing a good bit for them coming off the bench and just a really talented prospect. We know about his brother, but man, really talented player. Might be the most technically gifted player in this setup. Another versatile guy with his really good dribbling. He can play out wide. He's been filling in at the false nine role for us, where he's probably going to play this tournament, but this is the ideal setup, so I have him in the midfield. And just a really talented player. Good in the final third. He can pick up goals, provide assists, has a ton of energy. I think he might be comfortable playing the eight here, which is what I have him doing. And really good guy to have around. Then we have Jack McGlynn with my Philadelphia Union, who, just like Aronson, I should say, came from through there and just such a good passer with his left foot. And I think he's been maturing a lot physically. That's been the question for him. The technical ability's always been there. I think he's got the best left foot in the entire program. He just can pick out a pass with it. He can have some amazing long shots, great on set pieces. But you've always had to kind of cover for him in the midfield. But I think he's really matured physically, and he might be able to hold his own now. I'm still not sure, but I think in the youth team at least, he'll be fine. And just another really good prospect for us. They have two guys in Owen Wolf and Noel Buck who've recently broken through with their teams in MLS and have been getting a lot of playing time. Wolf is a 2004 player. Buck is a 2005 who will hopefully be just a fixture of the next U20 cycle. But I think he's been playing good enough that I'd call him into this group. I probably wouldn't have him be a starter, but man, with how impressive he's been playing for New England, you have to bring him in. And Wolf, we've seen his brother Tyler with this team. I think he's even better than his older brother. Just another good midfielder. He's been really playing well for Austin. Part of me was wondering if he was only playing because his dad was the coach, but no, he's earned that spot, and he's another really talented player. For this group of midfielders, there is a chance that Jack McGlynn won't be allowed to get called in because Philadelphia Union could reach the Champions League final. So if he's unavailable, I'd call in Alejandro Alvarado, who, similarly to Cuevas, moved abroad because LA Galaxy was going to be very tough to break through at. I guess Jalen Neal has shown that it is possible. I mean, Alvarado, Alvarez, and Araujo have already shown that you could break through, but they really don't treat their youth as well as they should. They should be getting a lot of better players coming through LA. But he moved to Portugal and he really hasn't been doing that great there. He didn't impress me in the most recent showings with this tournament. So I'm leaving him off the main squad, but he'll probably be in this team due to how many players won't get released. And I'm not disappointed in that because how good he's been with the team in the CONCACAF championship, where I think he was one of our standout players, but I think he hasn't shown enough to get back to this team, which is a testament to how good the squad has been. Now into the attack, and again, a lot of these players could play in midfield as well. I have Cade Cowell, Diego Luna, Quinn Sullivan, and Kevin Paredes. And again, some of these guys play in the midfield. Diego Luna is who I'm looking at. But man, just a really good squad. Cade Cowell, such an explosive attacker. He's been playing with the senior team a good bit and the domestic teams that we bring. And I think he can hold his own in that group. Just such a good physical presence. His technical ability does need to come along, but man, he can just be a bit of a game breaker, especially at this level where I don't think there will be too many defenses that can handle his physicality. So definitely somebody you want to bring into the squad. Then Diego Luna, just creative player, just somebody who we don't really produce, like as an American player, just can do some great things with the ball. He's a really two-footed player, can take corners from both sides with both of his feet, and I think he's been progressing a lot physically. He's been training with Real Salt Lake now after impressing in USL, and another player who's just an extremely talented guy who you want to see the most of moving forward. Then you have Kevin Paredes impressing with Wolfsburg, getting some good Bundesliga minutes, getting some starts, getting some goals. Just the guy who can cut in on his left foot. I want to play him at that right wing position because we've been dying for left footed attackers. This team does not have many. The senior team, I mean, doesn't have many at all. I'd be comfortable calling Paredes into the senior team because he's been playing that well for Wolfsburg, and that is that much of a need for the senior squad. So I feel very good about having him in the team, but him and Quinn Sullivan are probably not going to be released for this, which again is fine for their careers. Sullivan has been a very good goal scorer for this group. I love his energy when pressing, and he's even been able to pop up with goals from the right wing position. He's a right-footed player, but similar to Tim Weah, he's still able to come up with goals from that side. Been playing a good amount of minutes with Philadelphia Union this year. Really talented goal scoring forward, and I feel good about having him in the squad. He's a player who I definitely consider starting. There's a good amount of players on this team who are just like there's one spot where I'm like not sure about that last starter, but he's definitely in contention for that. And if he's unavailable and Kevin Paredes as well, you probably call in Cade Clark, who was probably one of the stars for this team at the beginning, but he just hasn't really progressed in his career. Got a couple of bad injuries, and his move to RB Leipzig hasn't been really working out, but he still has a good amount of talent. But I think with how many good players we have, I'd struggle to justify bringing him in. And then maybe I'd bring in another forward if we had to bring another spot. Um, just get out of the way right now. Ricardo Pepi would ideally be in this team as a striker. We know how good he is, but he should be with our senior team, and we're not going to call him into this competition. But an ideal world would be Ricardo Pepi. I think we replace him with Darren Yappy and maybe even call him like a Tega Ikoba, who's been playing pretty well for Portland. Really good physical player. Um, Yappy is a bit more of a traditional striker, good hold up play. He hasn't been scoring a lot or hasn't scored at all in MLS, but I think he's a talented player. And I do want to have at least like one true striker option we can bring off the bench. So I'd feel good about that being Darren Yappy. But I think if we had to give a starting lineup, I'd still play, Aronson as the false nine, depending on who gets released. I think unless Pepe is available, I'd probably be playing Aronson as a false nine. But I guess in the ideal team with the starting lineup, I'd probably go Slonina in goal, Neal and Craig at center back, Wiley at left back, Che at right back, Edelman in defensive midfield. Then I might go Aronson and Puskas in midfield, Paradis as the right winger, Pepe up top, and that left wing spot's the last one that I'm like kind of unsure about. I want to get Diego Luna in the team, but Quinn Sullivan's been playing very well as well, so that's a very tough decision for me. My Philadelphia Union bias says Quinn Sullivan, but Diego Luna is such a talented player that it might be him. But yeah, that's my opinion on the U20 team, and man, this draw I think was very good for us, and I think we should be able to progress. And I mean, we had a couple hard games against France and England, but I think that we can hang with these teams. I'm really excited to see what we can do at this tournament. It's going to be very fun to see these guys play. Maybe some of them will be able to turn a good performance at this U20 World Cup into a big move abroad. And I'm really excited to see these guys play. And that's all I got to talk about. See you.